The wind screamed to the mountain pass like something alive and furious. Captain Marcus Webb pressed his back against the frozen granite wall and watched his breath crystallize into ice the moment it left his cracked lips. Minus 23 degrees Celsius. Wind chill pushing it closer to minus 40. Visibility measured in feet, not meters. And somewhere up on those cliffs, 3 enemy positions had his men pinned in a frozen coffin they called the throat. He closed his eyes and counted again. 47. That was all that remained of Delta Company. 112 soldiers had entered this godforsaken mountain range 72 hours ago. Now 47 huddled against the ice-covered rock, ammunition nearly exhausted, medical supplies gone, hope bleeding out into the snow alongside their wounded. Webb opened his eyes and stared at the narrow passage ahead. 200 meters of exposed ground, rocky terrain that offered no cover, and 3 firing positions that turned that stretch into a kill zone no human being could survive. The machine gun nest came first. Eastern cliff face, maybe 200 meters up, carved into a natural cave formation that made it nearly impossible to assault. The PKM up there had already claimed 11 of his men. 11 soldiers who thought they could rush the gap during a lull in the fire. 11 bodies now frozen into snow, their blood turned to crimson ice. Second position was worse. A sniper on the western ridge, roughly 400 meters distant, elevated by at least 150 meters. That shooter had been patient, disciplined, terrifyingly accurate. 8 confirmed kills over the past 18 hours. All headshots. All soldiers who made the mistake of exposing themselves for more than 3 seconds. The mortar team completed the triangle of death, positioned behind the northern bend in the pass, invisible from any angle Webb could reach. They had rained high explosive rounds onto his company during the initial approach. That barrage had killed 23 soldiers in the first 4 minutes. Webb pulled the radio handset from his vest and keyed the transmission. Overlord Actual, this is Delta 6. Requesting immediate air support at grid reference Alpha 7942. We are combat ineffective and require immediate extraction. How copy? Over. Static answered him. Then a voice, thin and distant through the interference of the storm. Delta 6, Overlord Actual. Negative on air support. Storm system extends for 300 kilometers in all directions. Ceiling is 0. Earliest possible extraction window is 18 plus hours. Recommend you shelter in place and await weather break. Overlord out. 18 hours. Webb let the handset fall against his chest. He looked at his men, what was left of them, and he saw the same calculation happening behind every set of exhausted eyes. 18 hours of ammunition. 18 hours of cold. 18 hours of that sniper and that machine gun, and those mortars picking them apart one by one. They wouldn't last 6. Captain. Sergeant First Class Reyes appeared at his shoulder, face wind-burned and raw, ice crystals clinging to his 3-day beard. The men are asking about options. They want to know the plan. Webb almost laughed. The plan. As if there was a plan for this. Tell them to stay low and conserve ammunition, he said. We wait for the weather. Sir, with respect, we both know that's not going to work. Reyes' voice dropped lower. Hernandez is down to his last magazine. Thompson saw us maybe 60 rounds left. We got 4 men with frostbite bad enough they'll lose fingers. And Kowalski, he trailed off. How long does Kowalski have? Doc says 2 hours, maybe 3. Abdominal wounds gone septic. Without surgical intervention, he's dead. Webb stared at the frozen ground. Kowalski was 23 years old. He had a daughter he'd never met, born 6 weeks ago while they were deployed. The photograph was still taped inside his helmet. What about a ground assault? Webb forced himself to ask. If we concentrate everything we have left on one position, we'd lose half our remaining strength taking the machine gun nest alone. Reyes cut in, and even if we somehow cleared it, the sniper and mortars would chew up whoever survived. You'd be trading 20 men for one position, and we'd still be stuck. Webb knew he was right. He'd run the calculations a dozen times. There was no tactical solution that didn't end with most of his company dead in the snow. Then we need a volunteer, Webb said quietly. Someone to climb the western ridge, neutralize the sniper, then work their way to the other positions. One soldier, moving alone, using the storm as cover. Reyes stared at him. Captain, That's not a mission. That's a death sentence. A 5-hour climb in these conditions, negative 23 degrees, vertical ice faces, and even if someone made up there, they have to take out a prepared sniper at 400 meters in a blizzard, then somehow disable a fortified machine gun position, then eliminate a mortar crew they can't even see. He shook his head. No one's going to volunteer for that. Then I'll order someone. No, sir. Reyes' voice hardened. You won't, because anyone you order up that cliff is going to die, and both of you will know it. That's not an order. That's an execution. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the howling wind and the distant chatter of the enemy machine gun. Webb was about to speak again when a new voice cut through the storm. I'll go. Both men turned. She emerged from the blizzard like a ghost materializing from white fog, medium height, lean frame wrapped in Arctic camouflage, so effective she seemed to shimmer against the snow. No rank insignia visible on her gear. No unit patches. No name tape. Her face was hidden behind a thermal balaclava and tinted goggles that revealed nothing of the person beneath. If that opening hooked you, trust me, this story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more incredible missions like this and hit that notification bell. Now, let me show you what happened next. Webb's hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm. Identify yourself. The woman stopped 3 meters away. She moved with absolute economy. No wasted motion, each step precise and deliberate despite the howling wind threatening to throw her off balance. A large rifle case was strapped to her back, matte black, the outline suggesting something custom-built. Ice axes hung from her harness, and a coiled safety line was secured at her hip. That's not important, she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, almost eerily so given the chaos around them. What's important is that your company is trapped, your ammunition is nearly gone, and in approximately 6 hours you'll all be dead unless someone clears those positions. I can do that, with all due respect, Reyes growled. Who the hell are you? This is a restricted combat zone. Civilians aren't. I'm not a civilian. The way she said it stopped Reyes cold. Not defensive, not aggressive, just a statement of fact, delivered with the quiet certainty of someone who had no need to prove anything. Webb studied her more carefully. The rifle case wasn't military standard issue. It was specialized, the kind of hard case used for precision weapons that cost more than a sergeant's annual salary. Her gear was a mix of military grade and custom modifications. Everything functional, nothing decorative. And the way she stood, weight perfectly distributed, hands loose and ready, suggested training that went far beyond basic infantry. You're a shooter, Webb said slowly. Yes. What unit? None that exists on paper. Reyes stepped forward. That's not an answer. Give us credentials, documentation, something. For all we know, For all you know, I'm a hallucination brought on by hypothermia, she interrupted calmly. And in 6 hours, it won't matter who I am or where I came from, because you and every one of your men will be frozen corpses in this pass, unless those 3 positions are neutralized. I'm offering to do that. The only question is whether you're going to waste what little time you have asking questions I won't answer, or whether you're going to let me work. The wind screamed between them. Webb felt the weight of 47 lives pressing down on his shoulders. He thought about Kowalski dying 200 meters back, about the 11 bodies frozen into the kill zone, about the radio message that promised help wouldn't arrive for 18 hours. And he thought about the way this woman moved, the confidence in her voice, the precision of her equipment. What's your plan? He asked. The western ridge first. Your sniper problem. She didn't pull out a map. She seemed to have already memorized the terrain. There's a vertical approach along the southern face, mostly ice with granite handholds every 15 to 20 meters. In these conditions, it's about a 5-hour climb, maybe 6 if the wind picks up. That approach is impossible, Reyes said flatly. We scouted it. The ice is unstable. The wind exposure is lethal, and there's no protection from the sniper's field of fire. I know. That's why I'll be moving during his reloading intervals and using the storm as concealment. He's good, but he's not thermal equipped. I am. She unslung the rifle case from her back and laid on a flat rock, popping the latches with practiced ease. Webb felt his breath catch. Inside the case, nestled in custom-cut foam, was a rifle unlike anything in the standard military inventory. The barrel was longer than a standard sniper platform, fluted to reduce weight while maintaining rigidity, finished in a matte gray coating that seemed to absorb light. The stock was adjustable, ergonomically sculpted, with a cheek weld that suggested countless hours of customization. The scope mounted on top was massive, a dual-mode optic that Webb recognized from classified briefings as a thermal-optical hybrid worth more than most vehicles. Custom .338 Lapua Magnum, she said, running her gloved fingers along the barrel with something close to reverence. Effective range is 2,000 meters in optimal conditions. In this weather, with this wind and visibility, I'll be working at maybe half that, still enough to reach all three positions from the right angles. 40 rounds, Reyes observed, looking at the ammunition line precisely in the case. That's not a lot of margin for error. I don't need margin for error. These rounds are hand-loaded for consistency. Same powder charge to within 0.3 grains. Same seating depth to within 1,000th of an inch. Same muzzle velocity every time. 38 of them will never leave this case. Webb did the math. You're planning to clear 3 fortified positions with 2 rounds? I'm planning to clear 3 fortified positions with as few as necessary. The sniper will take 1, maybe 2 depending on whether he moves after I miss my first shot. The machine gun nest is 4 men, but I'm not planning to engage them directly. The mortar team is the same. There's a better solution than bullets for that one. She closed the case. My sidearm handles anything else. She drew the pistol from her thigh holster. A .45 caliber 1911 variant, well worn but immaculately maintained. The kind of weapon that had been used by professionals for a century because it worked. You're insane, Reyes said quietly. Possibly. Does that change the tactical situation? It didn't, and Webb knew it. He thought about chain of command, about protocols, about the regulations that govern every aspect of military operations. He thought about what would happen if he let an unidentified operative go off on her own in a combat zone, how he would explain it in his after-action report, what consequences might follow. Then he thought about 47 men freezing to death while he worried about paperwork. What do you need from us? He asked. For the first time, something shifted in her posture, a slight relaxation, as if she'd been prepared for a longer argument. Nothing. I work alone. I could send a team with you. Additional rifles, cover fire. No. The word was immediate and final. Additional personnel means additional noise, additional movement, additional targeting opportunities for that sniper. 1 person in a storm is invisible. 2 becomes a pattern. 3 becomes a target. I go alone or I don't go at all. Reyes stepped closer to Webb, lowering his voice. Captain, this doesn't feel right. We don't know who she is, where she came from, how she even got here. For all we know, she's been sent to what? Webb interrupted. To save us? You have a better theory, Sergeant? You have a better plan. Reyes had no answer. Webb turned back to the woman. If you can really do this, we owe you everything. But I need to know one thing before I let you walk into that storm. She waited. Why? Why volunteer for something like this? You don't know us. You have no obligation to these men. Walking up that cliff is almost certainly suicide. So why? The wind howled between them for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before, barely audible above the storm. Because someone has to. And because I stopped caring about things like recognition and names a long time ago. What matters is the mission. What matters is that 47 soldiers go home to their families. Everything else is just noise. She turned toward the cliff face, adjusting the rifle case on her back, checking the ice axes at her hips. Wait, Webb called out. At least tell me what to call you. Something for the report. She paused without looking back. There won't be a report. And if there is, I was never here. Then she walked into the blizzard and vanished. Sergeant Reyes stared at the wall of white, where she'd disappeared. Captain, I've been in combat for 16 years. I've worked with Delta, with Rangers, with operators from every branch. And I have never seen anyone move like that. Never seen anyone that calm walking towards certain death. Webb said nothing. He was still watching the place where she'd vanished, as if expecting her to rematerialize. You know what she is, don't you? Reyes pressed. I know what she might be, Webb said quietly. There are rumors, stories that circulate in certain circles, about individuals who don't exist in any database, who aren't attached to any unit, who appear when situations become impossible and disappear when they're resolved. Ghost tier, some people call them. Independent specialists who answer to no one except whatever conscience drives them. Ghosts don't exist. Neither do impossible mountain passes filled with enemy snipers and mortar teams that pin down entire companies. And yet here we are. Webb finally turned away from the storm. Get the men ready to move. If she actually pulls this off, we need to be prepared to advance the moment those positions go silent. And if she doesn't pull it off, then we die here, same as we were going to anyway. At least this way we have hope. The climb began in silence. She moved up the southern face of the western ridge with mechanical precision, each placement of her ice axis calculated to minimize noise and maximize purchase. The granite beneath the ice was treacherous, fractured by centuries of freeze-thaw cycles that had created countless potential failure points. One wrong strike, one poor placement, and the ice would shatter, sending her plummeting into the white void below. She didn't make wrong strikes. The cold was absolute, penetrating even through her insulated gear, reaching into her bones with fingers of pure ice. Minus 23 degrees. Wind chill dropping it further. Every exposed surface of her body was numb within the first 15 minutes. Her fingers, despite the specialized gloves, began to lose sensation after the first hour. None of it mattered. She had operated in worse conditions. She had climbed higher faces in thicker storms with heavier loads. The cold was just another variable to be accounted for, another factor in the endless calculations that ran through her mind with every meter of elevation gained. 400 meters to go before she reached the ridgeline. Then another 200 meters of traverse along the exposed western face to reach a firing position with clear sight lines to the enemy sniper. After that, another 300 meters of climbing to reach the elevation necessary for machine gun nest. And finally, the northern approach to deal with the mortar team. Total distance. Approximately 2 kilometers of vertical and horizontal movement across terrain that would kill most climbers in fair weather. Time available, perhaps 5 hours before hypothermia became inevitable. Ammunition, 40 rounds, though she expected to use far fewer. The math worked. Barely. She pulled herself over an ice shelf and paused to let her breathing stabilize. The wind was stronger here, gusting to 40 kilometers per hour, driving ice crystals into her goggles with enough force to scratch the lenses. She could feel the temperature dropping as she gained elevation, could feel her body beginning to slow despite everything. The .338 Lapua on her back felt heavier than it should have. 60 hours without sleep was catching up with her, the accumulated fatigue of the 72-hour insertion that had brought her to this mountain range in the first place. She had been tracking enemy movements in the region for 3 weeks, mapping supply lines, identifying command structures, building the intelligence picture that would eventually allow conventional forces to sweep through and clear the territory. It was quiet work, invisible work, the kind of work that never appeared in reports or briefings. Then Delta Company had walked into a trap. She watched it happen through her scope from 6 kilometers away, helpless to intervene as a machine gun nest opened fire, as the sniper began picking off soldiers, as the mortars rained death from behind the northern bend. 112 men, reduced to 47, in less than an hour. The smart move would have been to continue her observation mission, to document the engagement, record the enemy positions, and transmit the intelligence to command for future operations. That was the mission. That was what she'd been sent to do. Instead, she'd broken cover and moved toward the pass. Because 47 men were dying, and she was the only one who could stop it. 2 hours into the climb, she reached the first critical decision point. The ice face above her split into 2 possible routes. The left path was shorter but more exposed, cutting across a section of cliff that would be visible to the enemy sniper for approximately 90 seconds. The right path added another 40 minutes to her climb, but kept her hidden in a natural fold of the rock. She studied the wind patterns, calculated the likely intervals between the sniper scope sweeps, and chose the left path. 90 seconds of exposure. If the sniper happened to be looking at exactly the right section of cliff at exactly the right moment, she would be dead before she heard the shot. But the storm reduced visibility to less than 50 meters at ground level, which meant he would be relying primarily on thermal imaging to spot targets. Her gear was thermally insulated, not invisible, but close enough. She moved. Ice axe plant, pull. Ice axe plant, pull. Crampons biting into frozen granite. Body pressed flat against the cliff face to minimize her profile. Breath controlled. Heart rate steady. Every sense hyper-aware of the world around her. 45 seconds. 60. 75. A distant crack reached her ears, muffled by the wind. Not aimed at her. Somewhere down in the pass, the sniper had taken another shot at the trapped soldiers. She felt nothing. Not anger, not sympathy, not fear, just a cold calculation that added another name to the list of reasons why the man on that ridge needed to die. At the 90-second mark, she pulled herself into the shelter of an ice-filled crevice and allowed herself 5 seconds of rest. Then she continued climbing. Hour 3 brought her to the traverse section. The western ridge extended roughly 400 meters to the north before curving toward the enemy sniper's position. She could see nothing through the storm, just white, endless white, broken occasionally by darker shapes that might have been rocks or might have been shadows cast by nothing at all. Her thermal scope would have cut through the weather, but using it while climbing was impossible. She needed both hands for the ice axes, both feet planted firmly against the cliff. Every ounce of concentration focused on the simple task of not dying. The traverse was technically less demanding than the vertical sections, but more dangerous in its own way. The wind hit her from the side here, gusting with enough force to tear her free from the cliff face if she wasn't perfectly braced. 3 times she had to stop and press herself flat against the rock, while particularly violent blasts threatened to send her tumbling into the void. Each pause cost her time. Each gust of wind dropped her core temperature another fraction of a degree. She was beginning to feel it now. The cold was no longer something she could ignore through pure will. It was becoming part of her, seeping into her muscles, slowing her reactions, making every movement feel like it was happening through thick syrup. For hours, she had maybe one more hour of effective function before hypothermia began seriously degrading her performance. The traverse ended at a natural ledge, perhaps 2 meters wide, sheltered from the worst of the wind by an overhanging rock formation. She pulled herself onto the ledge and lay flat for a moment, breathing hard, feeling her heart pound against ribs that felt made of ice. Then she unslung the rifle case and began to prepare. The enemy sniper was 418 meters away. She could see him now through her thermal scope, a bright human-shaped blob of heat crouched behind a natural rock barrier on the opposing ridge. His position was well chosen, offering clear sight lines down into the pass, while remaining protected from return fire from below. He had a spotter with him, a second heat signature positioned slightly to his left, alternating between binocular observation and what appeared to be a handheld thermal unit. Professional, well-equipped, disciplined, none of it would save him. She settled into her firing position, adjusting her body until the rifle became an extension of herself. The bipod dug into the frozen rock, the stock pressed firmly against her shoulder. Her cheek found a custom weld she'd spent months perfecting. The scope picture stabilized, and suddenly the sniper was no longer a distant threat, but target clearly defined in her crosshairs. Wind speed, 32 kilometers per hour from the northwest, gusting to 38. Temperature, minus 24 degrees, dropping. Humidity, 91%, ice crystals in the air affecting bullet trajectory. Range, 418 meters, measured precisely by the laser rangefinder built into her scope. Elevation difference. She was approximately 30 meters higher than her target, requiring a slight downward adjustment. She ran the calculations automatically, years of training and experience compressing complex ballistics into intuitive adjustments. The .338 Lapua Magnum would travel that distance in approximately half a second. In that time, the wind would push the bullet roughly 12 centimeters to the right. The cold air, denser than standard conditions, would cause slightly less drop than normal. The ice crystals would create minimal but measurable drag. She adjusted her aim point and waited. The sniper was settling into a new firing position, shoulder pressed against his rifle, eye to his scope. He was looking down into the pass, searching for movement among the trapped soldiers. His spotter was saying something, pointing toward a section of rock where someone had apparently made a mistake of shifting position. She watched them through her thermal scope and felt nothing but cold professional calculation. One shot for the sniper, one for the spotter if necessary, then movement to the next position before anyone realized what had happened. Her finger found the trigger. She breathed out slowly, let her lungs empty naturally, feeling her heartbeat slow as her body recognized a familiar pre-shot state. Between heartbeats, that was when you took the shot. In that perfect moment of stillness between the systolic and diastolic pulse, when your body was as close to motionless as a living thing could be. She waited. The sniper shifted his weight, pressing his eye more firmly against the scope. The spotter raised his binoculars. Between heartbeats, she squeezed. The rifle kicked against her shoulder with controlled violence, the suppressor reducing the muzzle blast to a manageable crack that was instantly swallowed by the howling wind. The bullet left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second, cutting through the frozen air like a surgical instrument, following the precise trajectory her calculations had predicted. Half a second later, the sniper's head snapped backward. The spotter had exactly enough time to register that something was wrong before her second shot took him through the center of his chest. 2 down, 2 rounds expended. She cycled the bolt, chambering another round by instinct even as she scanned for additional targets. The thermal scope revealed no other heat signatures in the immediate area. The sniper position was clear. First objective complete. She allowed herself 3 seconds of stillness, then began repacking her rifle for movement. Down in the pass, Captain Webb heard the distant double crack of suppressed rifle fire and felt something he hadn't felt in hours. "Hope, Sergeant," he called out, keeping his voice low. "Did you hear that?" Reyes was pressed against the cliff wall 15 meters away, watching the machine gun nest through binoculars. "I heard something. Wind's making it hard to be sure, but wait." He adjusted his focus. The sniper position. There's no movement. Nothing in the last 30 seconds. Could be a low. Could be he's repositioning. Could be she actually did it. Reyes lowered the binoculars and looked at Webb with an expression that mixed disbelief with desperate hope. "Captain, if she took out that sniper, then we're down to 2 positions. Still impossible odds, but better than before." Webb keyed his radio. "All units, this is Delta 6. Possible hostile sniper neutralized on Western Ridge. Remain in position and await further developments. Acknowledge, over." One by one, the surviving squad leaders checked in. 47 soldiers, still alive, still waiting. Webb looked up at the storm-shrouded Western Ridge and wondered who she really was. The machine gun nest was 612 meters away. She had repositioned twice since the sniper engagement, moving along the ridgeline to find a firing angle that would allow her to address the cave-mounted weapon. It was a difficult shot, not just because of the distance, but because of the geometry involved. The PKM was set up just inside the cave mouth, protected by the natural rock formation from almost every possible angle. The crew of 4 was positioned behind sandbags and rocky cover, visible only as occasional heat signatures when they moved to adjust the weapon or scan for targets. A conventional engagement would require multiple shots, one for each crew member, assuming she could even identify clear targets through the storm and the shadows. Even with her skill, that meant 4 or 5 rounds, possibly more if anyone moved at the wrong moment. She had a different approach in mind. The PKM itself was the target, not the man, the machine. She studied the weapon through her scope, analyzing its configuration. Soviet design, air-cooled barrel, belt-fed mechanism. The feeding system was the weak point, a series of precisely machined components that guided the ammunition belt into the chamber. Disrupt that mechanism, and the weapon became a very expensive club. The feed tray cover was visible at certain angles, a flat metal component that hinged upward to allow belt loading. If she could put a round into that cover at exactly the right angle, the impact would deform the metal, jamming the mechanism beyond field repair. 612 meters. Wind pushing hard from the northwest. Cold air. Ice crystals. She ran the calculations. The shot was technically possible. Barely. She would be aiming at a target roughly 15 centimeters wide, in a storm that reduced visibility to near zero, at a distance that pushed even her custom rifle to its effective limits. She had made harder shots. Not many, but some. The question was timing. If she fired at the machine gun and missed, the crew would know they were under attack from a ridge. They would either abandon the position, which would be acceptable, or they would start spraying suppressive fire in her general direction, hoping to get lucky. And in her current state, exhausted and half frozen, she might not be able to move fast enough to avoid getting hit. One shot. It had to be one shot. She settled back into position, pressing her eye to the scope, feeling the rifle become an extension of her body once more. The wind was gusting harder now, pushing snow across her field of vision in thick white curtains that obscured the target for seconds at a time. Wait! The curtains shifted, revealing the cave mouth for perhaps 2 seconds before the next gust closed it off again. 2 seconds. Enough time to fire, as she was already aligned. She adjusted her aim, compensating for the wind, the distance, the cold. The crosshairs settled on the feed tray cover, visible as a dark rectangle against the lighter stone of the cave. Wait, another curtain of snow. She held her breath, held her position, held everything. The curtain shifted. She squeezed. The rifle kicked. The bullet flew. 612 meters. Wind compensation. Elevation adjustment. Cold air density. The round struck the feed tray cover exactly where she'd aimed, penetrating the thin metal and deforming the entire assembly. The PKM's feeding mechanism crumpled inward, jamming the bolt in a half-closed position that no amount of field maintenance would fix. Through her scope, she watched the machine gun crew react with confusion, then alarm. One of them tried to work the action manually, slamming his palm against the charging handle. Another was already pulling at the jam belt, trying to clear what he assumed was a simple malfunction. They didn't know they were under attack. The storm had swallowed the sound of her shot completely. As far as they knew, their weapon had simply failed at the worst possible moment. She allowed herself a thin smile beneath her balaclava. Second objective complete. The mortar team was the hardest target. They were positioned behind a northern bend in the pass, completely invisible from any angle she could reach along the western ridge. She had spent 20 minutes studying the terrain through her scope, looking for any firing position that would give her clear sight lines to the mortar pit. There were none. The geometry of the pass was working against her. The northern bend created a natural shield, blocking line of sight from every elevated position on the western ridge. To engage the mortar team directly, she would need to either descend into the pass itself, suicide, given the remaining enemy positions, or circle around to the eastern ridge and approach from behind. The eastern ridge would take another 3 hours of climbing. In her current state, with her core temperature dropping and her fingers growing increasingly numb, she didn't have 3 hours. She needed another solution. She lowered the rifle and studied the terrain above the mortar position. The northern cliff face rose nearly vertically from the bend in the pass, granite and ice layered together in patterns created by millennia of geological violence. It was unstable terrain. She could see the fracture lines even from this distance, the places where thermal expansion and contraction had weakened the rock matrix. One of those fracture lines ran directly above the mortar pit. She calculated the angle, the distance, the energy required. The .338 Lapua Magnum wasn't a demolition round, but it didn't need to be. It just needed to be the last straw, the final stress point that tipped an already unstable system into catastrophic failure. 3 shots, placed precisely along that fracture line. The cumulative impact would transfer enough energy into the rock matrix to trigger a chain reaction, a rockfall, a precisely engineered rockfall that would bury the mortar team under tons of frozen granite. It was insane. It was something out of a movie. No sniper in history had ever tried to use bullets as geological tools. But she wasn't any sniper in history. The first shot struck the rock face 147 meters above the mortar position. She watched through her scope as chips of stone exploded outward from the impact point, the .338 round transferring its kinetic energy into frozen granite with devastating efficiency. A small crack appeared, running perhaps 10 centimeters from the bullet hole. Good, but not enough. She adjusted her aim, moving 17 meters down the fracture line, to a point where 2 fault planes intersected. This was a critical junction, the point where stress would concentrate and propagate. Second shot. The crack from her first impact began to widen immediately. She could see it happening in real time through her scope. Stone separating from stone, ice shattering the gaps, the accumulated tension of millennia beginning to release. Third shot. 6 meters further down, right at the edge of the overhang. The cliff face groaned. Even through the storm, even from hundreds of meters away, she heard the deep geological complaint of rock that was no longer willing to support itself. The fracture line became a fault line, then a separation plane. A slab of granite the size of a small building peeled away from the cliff face and began to fall. The mortar team heard it. She watched through her thermal scope as 3 bright heat signatures looked upward, saw what was coming, and tried to run. They didn't make it. The rock fall struck the mortar pit with apocalyptic force, burying everything beneath tons of frozen stone. The impact sent shock waves to the past that Webb's men felt as a brief tremor, a vibration through the ice and rock that nobody could explain. 3 objectives, all neutralized. She lowered her rifle and allowed herself a single breath of relief. Then she heard the crunch of boots on ice behind her. The revenge squad had been climbing for 3 hours. 4 men, probably security element attached to mortar team, dispatched the moment the sniper position went silent to hunt down whoever was responsible. They had followed her route up the southern face, using the same handholds, the same ice shelves, the same crevices that had carried her to this position. She had been so focused on the targets in front of her that she hadn't considered the targets behind. The first one came over the ridge at a dead run. Assault rifle already rising to firing position, face twisted with rage and cold, and the desperate knowledge that she had just killed everyone he served with. She didn't have time to bring her rifle around. Her sidearm cleared the holster in a single smooth motion, muscle memory taking over while her conscious mind was still processing the threat. The .45 spoke once. The first attacker dropped, sliding backward down the ice with a neat hole in his chest. The second one was already on the ledge, firing wildly, bullets cracking past her head and striking the rock wall behind her. She dove left, rolled, came up firing. 2 rounds. Center mass. He folded. Numbers 3 and 4 appeared simultaneously, spreading apart to create multiple angles of attack. Professional movement, tactical spacing. These weren't conscripts or irregulars. They were trained soldiers who understood small unit tactics. She was out of position, lying prone on frozen rock, with 2 armed men converging from different directions. Her rifle was too long, too slow for close quarters work. All she had was the .45 and whatever ammunition remained in the magazine. The third attacker fired a burst that chipped stone centimeters from her head. She rolled again, taking herself off the ledge and onto a narrow shelf below, dropping nearly 2 meters to a surface barely wide enough to hold her body. The impact drove the breath from her lungs, but it also broke the attacker's sight line. Temporary advantage, maybe 3 seconds. She used all of them. Her hand found an ice axe at her hip, pulled it free, hurled it upward at a shallow angle. The spinning tool caught the third attacker in the throat as he leaned over the ledge to find her, the pick burying itself in soft tissue with wet finality. 3 down, 1 to go. The fourth man was smarter than his companions. Instead of rushing, he retreated, using the terrain to create distance and cover. She could hear him moving, boots scraping against rock, breath harsh and ragged from the climb and the altitude. He was circling, trying to flank her. She couldn't stay on this shelf. It was a coffin waiting to close. She needed to move, needed to regain the initiative, needed to finish this before hypothermia finished her. Her fingers found a handhold in the rock above her. She pulled herself up, ignoring the screaming protests of muscles that had passed their limits hours ago. The ledge appeared before her, empty except for the 2 bodies and the blood already freezing into crimson ice. Where was the fourth man? A sound to her left, the scrape of metal on stone. She spun, pistol rising, but he was already firing. The bullet caught her in the left shoulder, spinning her backward, sending the .45 tumbling from suddenly nerveless fingers. Pain exploded through her body, hot, sharp, immediate, cutting to the cold like a knife through paper. She hit the frozen rock and slid, gravity pulling her toward the edge of the ledge. Her right hand clawed for purchase, found nothing, kept sliding. The fourth man walked into her field of vision, rifle trained on her center mass. "You killed them all," he said in accented English. "My brothers. You killed every one of them." She could see his finger tightening on the trigger, could see the death waiting in his eyes. Her left arm was useless, the shoulder wound pumping blood onto the ice. Her pistol was gone, her rifle unreachable. She was out of options, out of time, out of everything except the cold determination that had carried her through decades of impossible missions. Her right hand found the safety line at her hip, the carabiner, the quick-release mechanism. Not all of them, she said through gritted teeth. She slapped the quick release. The safety line, still anchored to a rock pillar 10 meters above, went taut instantly. The tension cord caught her attacker across the legs, sweeping his feet out from under him with enough force to send him tumbling backward. She was already moving, rolling, ignoring the agony in her shoulder, her right hand finding the ice axe still embedded in the third attacker's throat. One pull freed it. One swing buried it in the fourth man's chest. He stared at her with wide, uncomprehending eyes. Then he stopped staring at anything. She lay on the frozen ledge for a long moment, surrounded by 4 bodies, bleeding from a wound that was going to kill her if she didn't get it treated soon. The mission was complete. All 3 positions neutralized. Delta Company was free to advance through the pass. All she had to do was survive long enough to get down the mountain. She pushed herself upright, biting back the scream that wanted to escape from her shoulder, and began the long descent. Captain Webb saw movement on the western ridge 3 hours later. The storm had begun to clear, visibility improving from meters to hundreds of meters as the wind slowly died, and the clouds began to thin. Through his binoculars, he could make out the cliff faces that had been invisible before, the routes that his mysterious savior had climbed, the positions that had held them hostage for so long. And there, descending the southern face at an agonizingly slow pace, was a single figure. "Sergeant," he called out, "get a medical team ready. Our ghost is coming down." He watched her descend for another hour, marveling at the sheer will required to make that journey in her condition. Through the magnification, he could see the blood staining her left side, the way she favored her right arm, the halting movements that spoke of exhaustion beyond anything he could imagine. By the time she reached the bottom of the cliff, he was there to meet her. She stumbled the last few meters, her body finally giving out, and he caught her before she hit the ground. "Medical," he shouted. "Give Medicare now." But when he looked down at her, he saw something that stopped his words in his throat. She was smiling. "The pass is clear," she whispered. "Get your men through. There's a secondary position 2 kilometers north, but it won't be manned for another 4 hours. You have a window. Forget the window. You need medical attention. You're bleeding out. I've had worse." She tried to push away from him, tried to stand on her own, but her legs wouldn't hold her weight. "You're wounded. The one with the abdominal injury. Kowalski. Is he still alive?" Webb felt his eyes widen. "How did you know his name?" "I know a lot of things." "Is he alive?" "Yes." "Barely. Doc says another hour, maybe 2. Then stop wasting time on me and get him through the pass. There's a medical facility at the northern base. If you move now, you can get there in time." She shoved him away with her good arm, somehow finding the strength to stay upright. "Thank you," Webb said. "Whatever you are, whoever sent you, thank you. You saved 47 lives today." The woman looked at him with eyes that had seen more than anyone should ever see. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Thank me when you get your men home." Then she walked away. They found her position an hour later. The pass was clear, just as she promised. The machine gun nest was abandoned, the crew having fled when their weapon failed, and the cliff face collapsed. The mortar pit was buried under tons of rubble. The sniper position held only 2 frozen bodies. But the woman was gone. Search teams scoured the western ridge for 3 days after the storm cleared. They found her firing positions, perfect spots chosen with an eye for concealment and clear sight lines that spoke of decades of experience. They found spent brass from her rifle, the casing still bearing the marks of hand loading that had made each round precision instrument. They found the bodies of the 4-man squad she had killed in close quarters, ice axes and bullet wounds, telling a story of desperate combat that no one would ever fully understand. But they never found her. No trail, no tracks, no indication of where she had gone after leaving Captain Webb at the base of the cliff. Just her equipment, abandoned on a ledge overlooking the pass. The rifle case empty. The custom .338 Lapua Magnum, receiver destroyed, barrel plugged with thermite residue that had rendered it completely inoperable. Standard procedure for operators who never let their equipment fall into enemy hands. And carved into the frozen rock beside the case, 2 words in precise block letters that the wind and ice would erase within weeks. The word stayed with Webb for the rest of his career. 47 soldiers walked out of the throat that day. All 47 made it to the medical facility. Kowalski was operated on within the hour. He kept his leg and eventually made a full recovery. He never did get to meet the woman who saved his life. None of them did. The official after-action report listed the enemy position neutralizations as achieved through coordinated heavy weapons fire and close air support during a break in weather conditions. No mention was made of the woman, her rifle, or her 5-hour climb through impossible terrain. Ghost tier operators didn't exist on paper. Webb retired 3 years later with a silver star and a chest full of medals. He never told anyone the full story of what happened in the throat. Not because he was ordered to stay silent, but because he knew no one would believe him. But sometimes, late at night, he would remember. He would remember the calm voice offering to do the impossible. The precise rifle shots echoing through the storm. The blood-stained figure descending the cliff with wounds that should have killed her. And he would remember the 2 words carved into frozen rock, the only testament to what a nameless woman had done for 47 men she would never meet again. The words she had left behind, not as a boast or a signature, but as something else entirely. A promise, a reminder, a statement of purpose from someone who had given everything for strangers and asked nothing in return. The sunrise was beginning to color the sky outside Webb's window, painting the clouds in shades of gold and rose. He poured himself a drink and raised it to the east. Everyone, he murmured. That was what she had carved into the ice. 2 simple words that contained everything she believed, everything she fought for, everything she was willing to die for. Everyone, every soldier, every life, every person trapped in a frozen coffin, waiting to die. Worth saving, worth climbing 5 hours through a blizzard for, worth taking a bullet for. She had never given her name, never explained where she came from or where she went afterward. She had simply appeared when she was needed, done what no one else could do, and vanished like smoke in the wind. A ghost. But ghosts didn't save lives. She did.